It's really great to have you here today. Now, Councillor O'Neill is with us. If you can give a wave, Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Sean Rush was also scheduled to be in this room, but as he is unwell, I'm not actually expecting him, but he may pop in. We might get lucky, but I did speak to him this morning and he's reasonably unwell, so I'm not expecting him at this point. So it's Councillor O'Neill and myself here to listen to you today and kind of facilitate this discussion. So what we'll do is everybody will have 5 minutes to sort of say their piece and give us your views, and then we'll have some time for kind of questions at the end of that. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups or individuals on my list, so we'll have plenty of time. That'll be 25 minutes of just hearing from everybody, and then there'll be some time for questions at the end of that as well. And just to introduce you to some of the other people who are on the call, we've got Andrew Wharton here who's joining us. Hi Andrew, he's one of our planners from our planning team. And we've also got Letitia here who's joining us. She's helping to organise all of this and make sure all the councillors show up in the right meeting at the right time. So thank you, Letitia. So we've got a few other people on the call, and then we have all of you lovely people as well. So on my list, I have Cassandra Ng, Matt Norwell and Drew Woods from Vital Healthcare Property Trust first. If you'd like to introduce yourselves and then get going with your 5 minutes to share your views with us on the district plan. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's Cassandra. I'm a planner at Barker & Associates, and I'm here with Matt Norwell, another planner from Barker & Associates. We're here with Drew Woods from Vital Healthcare. Drew will just give a brief overview of who Vital Healthcare are, and then Matt and I will dive into the planning side of things for a bit.
Thanks, Cassandra. So yeah, I work for Vital Healthcare Property Trust. We're a dedicated developer and investor in healthcare real estate. So the 2 sites that everyone should be familiar with that we own in Wellington are Wakefield Hospital and Bowen Hospital. So really just here to give some thoughts via Barker's, because they're the experts, around how we can make a submission on the plan so that we can have appropriate planning rules across our sites so that we can continue to invest in and expand and do everything we need to build up those hospitals to deliver the outcomes that that our operators at those hospitals want to deliver to the people of Wellington.
Cool, thanks Drew. So we made a submission on the proposed draft district plan on behalf of Vital. I guess one of the key things that came through in our submission was that the current zoning proposed for both the hospitals doesn't provide for the development of private healthcare for hospital facilities. I think they're both zoned residential, which is quite restrictive. And we've reviewed quite a few district plans across the country, and this seems to be a common issue with many private healthcare facilities being zoned residential, and these are creating some real barriers to future development. One possible solution we've found is down in Christchurch. In their new district plan, they've got a zone called Specific Purpose Hospital Zone, and it provides for public and private hospital and healthcare facilities. And within that, they've got a range of subzones for different facilities depending on where they are. And for those subzones, they've got kind of a bespoke set of development standards, which are quite useful, and they respond to what's surrounding that particular site, say whether it's residential or commercial. And so, yeah, we think that's quite a good approach and one that could be adopted in the proposed district plan.
Thanks, Cass. The only other thing I might add to that, just so the councillors and Andrew and anyone else from council who's on the call, getting the zoning right is important, because the consequence of getting it wrong means that Vital have to go through a non-complying activity resource consent, even if they want to do something very minor, like expand by one of their sites by maybe 2 or 3 bedrooms. That's because of the residential zoning, which doesn't provide for a hospital, which sort of makes sense. So we don't want to have to go through that, because there's time, effort, cost involved in a non-compliant proposal. Whereas if we can get the zoning right And that Christchurch example that Cass just talked about is a really good one. The sites that we've got, and we can talk to Andrew if he's keen a little bit more about that. The zoning, if you get it right, it doesn't mean Vital get away with not needing a resource consent. Of course, they've got to go through it. It's just a better process to reflect what's actually on the ground. Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry, Cassandra, did you have anything to wrap up?
No, I think that's it from us. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll come back with some questions, I'm sure, at the end. Next on my list, I have John Burton and Sue Orr. Welcome.
Hi there. Yeah, so John Burton, I'm a resident of Hannah Warehouse in Leeds Street.
And Sue Orr here, and I also am a resident in the Hannah Warehouse.
So our submission is very simple. It's that Wellington at the moment has far too few green spaces to meet the needs of the existing 15,000 people that live in the central city, and that number keeps increasing because everywhere you look there are more apartment blocks and developments going ahead. Also conspicuous by its absence of them are green spaces, and the plan talks about I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but very lofty discussion about greening of the city, but very little in the way of practical solutions. And what we advocate for is that the Oaks complex, which is council land, be demolished, and that Te Aro Park be extended so that it extends all the way from Cuba Mall to Taranaki Street. The idea isn't new. If you go way back to a 2010 report, that was suggested that it be grassed in. There's no shortage of retail space for those that would be displaced, retail and hospo places, and it would be a fantastic opportunity to have a decent sized park in the middle of the city. So there are other advantages.
Yeah, I mean, it would be an opportunity to rethink the current space in terms of the safety issues around the park there as it is at the moment, and just a fresh think about how to combine the idea of green space servicing everybody. It's not just people that live around here, it's people that work in town and would like somewhere green and safe to go and sit and have their lunch. And so resolving some of the existing safety issues that have been pretty well documented in media over the last year at least, and just seize the opportunity to kind of make it a better space for everybody who uses it, a more useful space, a space that people actually want to go and use, right in the heart of the Cuba precinct. Mm.
And there was a 2010 planning for growth, which is a strategic plan back in 2019, another council initiative. And when it was reported in the Don Post, the headline was "Wellington Growth Plan: Golden Opportunity to Get Rid of Eye-wateringly ugly buildings." And it's clear that everyone, I don't hear any defenders of the Oaks, which was built as a temporary structure. And in that same article, Councillor Young said that that's how she described it, as eye-wateringly ugly. And the mayor also had ideas, some good ideas for how it could be repurposed. So it's not a new idea, and we'd just like to see if it might gain some traction. We also had I had in my submission, but I won't talk to it because we are short on time, but a similar. You could also use the Wilson car park on the corner of Leeds Street and Ghuznee to good effect as well, which is just an ugly car park. And you know, cars are supposed to be yesterday's news, along with the parks that go with them. So that would be another potential location. Anything else, Sue? No. So that's our brief submission.
Thank you very much, John and Sue. It has been a topic of conversation over these hearings, and you know, we certainly are always looking for opportunities to find in-city green spaces. So I'm sure we'll come back to you with some more questions. Thank you. Alistair Bickett, you're next on my list. Handing over to you for your 5 minutes.
Thank you. My submission stands. Just wanted to talk to a couple of points. 36 years we've been living in Mount Vic. Brought up the family here, love it to bits, and watched it gentrify during that period. So I have concerns around the removal of the demolition, pre-1930s demolition rule. You know, here's something that sort of, when people think of Wellington, they think about the heritage buildings, the character and all that, and I'd hate to be slave to accountants' boxes put across the country, put across this Wellington profile. So I just want to make a comment about that. I'm also concerned about the, and it didn't quite come through in my submission, the infrastructure and the transport networks that we're sort of piling and tend to pile new structures, new buildings into a already problematic networks. You know, the sewage, the water, all those networks require a lot of work, and the transport system by and large is reasonably good, but all of a sudden I didn't see too much comment about how it all integrates and works together. So if we have an extra 10, 15,000 people, this is the way it would look. So I would want to see some.
Oh, I think we've just lost you there, Alistair. We've just had you freeze on our screens. We'll give it a moment and see if he comes back. Otherwise, we can pop back to Alistair later on in the session. Doesn't look like it's going to come right immediately. Letitia, maybe if you could get hold of Alistair and see if you can get him back online, and we will come back to him later on in the session.
I will do that now for you.
Thank you so much. All right, so moving on, I would like to welcome Martin Hebner.
Good afternoon.
Martin, over to you.
Yep, I've sent the council a couple of photographs and a plan thingy, and just to help with the submission. So maybe Letitia could bring them up for everybody to see. Or is she still trying to find? Okay. So my submission is basically about the area which is the Mount Victoria character precinct, and the photos I've also taken. So the red dot signifies where the photo was taken from, and the red panel areas signify the extent of what's likely with the new proposed planned heights. So if you could then go to the proposed before and after photos, and I'll have a bit more discussion on that. Are we still there? Letitia? There we go. Right, so this photo was taken from Waitangi Park, and it's looking at Mount Victoria and the green belt of the town belt, and then the lower photo is the same one with a render of 6-storey height buildings along the ridgeline at Roxburgh Street. So I've spent a lot of time in the past with a submission that was on the Oriental Bay area and trying to retain the green space that was by the monastery and the area that the town built, as seen from various parts of the city, as being an area that's worthy of retention. And I feel that this proposed plan and the heights that are being changed in this area are going to have a similar effect that's going to be detrimental to the views of that same area of the town belt, and because it's being obscured by the planned heights. The other thing that there seems to be what we call it, that there's this erosion, that there's a contradiction in the objectives and the character of the precinct, which says to minimise further erosion of the character and enhance existing character. And if you look at the way that area has been ring-fenced by 6-storey buildings, it doesn't enhance the character of the existing buildings, and trying to keep that character is going to in fact destroy it. And I think there was another submission by the Mount Victoria History Organisation, which also identifies the same issues. And I think it's something that should be investigated, that there hasn't been sufficient notice taken of the heights of topography and how these buildings are going to have a detrimental effect on existing character buildings. And I think that one of the main reasons why council were so highly advocating these buildings was to improve the chance of assisted housing and cheaper housing for everyone. This character area is probably one of the most expensive areas around Wellington, and the cost of land is only going up, where these new changes that allow extra heights is going to increase the value of that land to the detriment of the values of the character areas where these excess buildings are not going to be permitted. So I think that it is also the heights of these new buildings is going to adversely affect the amenity of existing buildings, because there are fewer restrictions on multi-unit buildings that go to these heights that are going to be allowed. So that's basically my submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Really appreciate that. Alistair, sorry we had some internet technology problems there for a moment, but we can come back to you, and we'd love to hear the rest of your submission.
Thank you. It's probably a bit broken now, but this, as I say, the thrust of it really is about the integration of the infrastructure readiness and transport connectedness. That's one of the primary concerns, and I didn't see that through. And of course, there's suggestions since that are putting the reopening the stream down between Kent and Cambridge, and so I didn't see how that flowed and worked. And then there's this wall of buildings because the expanded definition of where the city ends, it sort of now creeps across to Kent Terrace, and the 6-storey buildings will be flung up down Kent Terrace. To be honest, I couldn't see how that worked well with our connection with the environment. We're seeing the green space. All we're going to see is concrete and windows. And I just think about our own psychological health, our own the health of our city suddenly taken over by what I'm not sure of is a material need for more housings, particularly in the Mount Vic character areas. So I acknowledge that there is a need to plan for the future. I need to plan for more people coming into Wellington. All that's taken for granted. But do you destroy what's going good at the moment, or do you sort of prioritise some areas and phase in, all green fields and all these other spots in between, and Home Street and Hania Street and all around there? You might say, yep, that we could do some stuff in there. Or do we just apply a blanket rule across? We're going to change the nature and features of Wellington. We're going to interfere with the definitions of character. We don't apply heritage in a strict way, and we allow a lot of interpretation to the rules, as will happen over time. And suddenly the profile of this lovely place has changed. And I'm just keen to see a bit more control at the beginning, that definitions are clear, and that's basically where I come from. I'm not a growth denier, but I just want to see it done in the right places and with a very even hand.
Thank you, Alistair, and thanks for persisting with us through a bit of technological issues. It was good to be able to hear the rest of your submission. And I'm sure we'll come back with some questions for you after our last submission. So moving on to Community Housing Aotearoa. I've got Chris Glaudel on my list.
Also joined by Vic.
Welcome.
Tēnā koutou. My name's Vic and I'm the Chief Executive at Community Housing Aotearoa. So we're a peak body for the national community housing sector, but we provided a submission on behalf of the Wellington Community Housing Providers Network, which has 12 members and 1,800 affordable tenancies across the range of social housing needs that we have here in Pōneke. So that includes transitional, emergency, long-term rental and progressive home ownership. And I'm now going to hand over to Chris, our Deputy CE, to deliver the rest of our detail for you.
Thank you, Vic. Yeah, Chris Glaudel with Community Housing Aotearoa, and a resident of Lyle Bay. And I've been here 10 years and saw the changes that continue to come through the city. And I guess our submission on behalf of the network is focused on one issue, and that was a question regarding assisted housing. Obviously, we have interest in the broader things, but really wanted to focus in on something that we felt would have the most impact for lower income working Wellingtonians, and that is just being able to have a place in the city that they can afford to live. And in reviewing the options that were put forward, we felt that option 3.5 was the preferred option for that, or also option 4 that would provide the most positive outcomes for the overall city, and especially for those on lower incomes. And as we look at the national scene and what's occurring, obviously housing is getting more and more expensive. As was already noted, the upzoning that's occurring is resulting in a value uplift of the underlying land values. And these assisted housing options are a means to ensure that we don't end up in an extremely stratified housing system where only the very wealthy can afford to live in a community like Wellington that has some wonderful sub-neighborhoods, Mount Vic, Newtown, Lyle Bay, amongst many others. And so we really urge the council to strongly look at a mechanism to ensure that as the city continues to grow, that it's a city that continues to cater for all income levels and different types of households. And we think that this option gives not only that affordability component, but also the typology, where those resources that come in as new developments come forward could be put toward meeting specific housing needs, whether it be for smaller units, 1 or 2 bedrooms. We know huge demographic changes of more and more single person households over time, and the market not as responsive in that area. It also can cater to larger households, multi-generational, in delivering a typology that might not otherwise be something that the market delivers. And so our members feel that for them to be more successful and for the community to remain balanced, that having these types of mechanisms in place is a key going forward within the district plan. As a national peak body organization, we're also working with central government in bringing forward information and examples to them of the types of interventions that are required through legislation to ensure that Wellington and other councils can do this within a legal framework that's clear for everyone and provides the certainty of the outcomes. And we've discussed with them and submitted on the housing amendment bill that went through that provided kind of the blanket upzoning, and their own expert advice that was commissioned from PwC and Sense Partners that basically says it's a gift to existing landowners, and that the experience in Auckland through the unitary plan, the special housing areas, documents the uplift in value that occurred and no increase in affordability. And in fact, things have become much more difficult. So we would just urge you to consider utilizing these tools in the future, and to make sure that that it is included in the final district plan, And if you have other technical questions, happy to continue the dialogue with the appropriate staff on those, because it does get a bit in the weeds. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris and Vic. All right, that's kind of our first, we've heard from everybody, so now we can have a bit more of a kind of conversation and discussion. I'm going to start with some questions. I think I'd be really keen to talk to John and Sue, where you came to talk to us about green spaces in the city, and how we might go about, you know, providing more of those green spaces. I have a feeling that while many people would like a green space at the Oaks, it's got very complex lease and ownership arrangements, despite the fact that it is council land. But where are the areas that you would like to see more green space, and what kind of green space is important to you? Is it large bits of lawn, or do you just want somewhere to be able to sit and kind of have a coffee? What are the sort of things you're looking for?
From my perspective, yeah, the things you just mentioned, somewhere nice to sit. Also, there've been some inspired ideas about the idea of community gardens, and there was at one stage down on, you know, for that car park, the Leeds Street corner of Leeds and Gusney. That was actually one of the suggestions there, and it would either side of Hannah Laneway. That was one of the, has been a council initiative, which I think has been hugely successful, and the council needs to pat itself on the back there. The Hannah Laneway is marvellous, and a green space at the, you know, terminating on either end or both ends of Hannah Laneway would be amazing. Yeah, I appreciate the legal position. I've actually got I've searched and obtained a copy of the lease, so it was madness. There's 21 years. It's a perpetual lease, but there must be ways out of that. And I don't know what the legal position is in relation to that car park space, but yeah, somewhere to sit, picnic, and possibly, yeah, wouldn't it be cool if you could go down, if there were people growing vegetables or flowers,
or fruit trees planted, or just a useful use of a green space. A green space doesn't have to be passive, it can be active, and you know, a community an area that is useful to the people that live around there, but also useful to the people who pass through. I'm sure there's been research done about, you know, the planting of community gardens and things, and I don't know what the research would say, but it seems to me that any trees are better than no trees, and therefore maybe fruit trees are better than any trees. I don't know. I just like the idea of a place that's kind of people can engage with in an active way, and help people, you know, places that are kind of not just beautiful places, but are useful places to inner city dwellers. And the other thing I would say is, you know, it's such a shame when you get to a point where the city's inner city parks are the places you have to avoid because they're not safe. That feels like a terrible travesty of kind of the original intention of having public spaces. So there must be other ways of thinking about them. And I think to some, you know, European parks which have, you know, they do have actually wrought iron fences around them that are locked at night maybe, but are open up during the day for everybody to use. And it would just be a great opportunity to think really openly about all the possibilities if we're talking about developing green spaces in the middle of the city.
Thanks, so that's some great suggestions. And yeah, there's a lot of work. We've got a few experts in council who look at issues like how do we design green spaces so that they are safe and they don't lead to that kind of antisocial behaviour. So it's an area that we're certainly given a lot of thought to about how we do that well. Councillor O'Neill, would you like to ask a question?
Questions for everyone, but because we're chatting to John and Sue, thank you so much for your submission. A close friend of mine lives in the same block as you, and I know how difficult it is to find a permeable spot for a dog or nearby green space. So I guess you spoke about those two opportunities, which I love, but how do you feel about, I think, Cobblestone Park and Glover Parks with one outside Wogan Bigabond or other places like that, or I'm just conscious, how close is close enough for you, or is going to a place like Rogan Vigabond a little bit too far away in terms of green space that you'd like?
Well, I suppose it's, you know, these are terribly subjective and personal, you know, aren't they, opinions about those. I don't actually think that those parks work very well for some reason. I'm not sure why. But and I don't think, as I say, the Aotearoa Park's just too, it doesn't work at all for all the reasons we have discussed. But I think the city, the central city, just needs more green spaces. And, you know, for those that have lived in big cities overseas, like London's amazing, the number of green, and so you lived in Paris.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are little bits of green here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah.
And Wellington's a bit, you know, concrete. And if there are some opportunities, then grab them.
Yeah. I mean, I would just agree with what John has said. I mean, personally, I quite like Glover Park outside Rogan Vagabond. I think that's, you know, on a good day, it's got a nice vibe to it. So, and personally, I don't find it too far to go, but I know that it wouldn't suit everybody, particularly, you know, because it's kind of associated with a music venue, which is fine. But, you know, maybe, I mean, that park to me is fine. But I just look at, I'm more coming from a point of view of look at the negative spaces and bring them into a positive space. So look at what is out there already in terms of Te Aroha Park and just think, well, you know, it's absolutely not doing the thing that it should do for its local community. It's doing whatever is happening there is not serving anybody well. And so what could be done about that? That's more the way I'm coming at it.
Thank you, Sir and John. I think excellent points.
Yeah.
Councillor Condi, back to you.
All right, I was just looking at the time, and is everybody all right to stay a little bit longer? So we're scheduled to be finishing right now, but because we started late, I'm quite comfortable to stay for an extra 20 minutes. But if there's anybody who needs to leave first, we can perhaps take questions from you to start with. Councillor O'Neill, I'm happy to hand back to you for questions if you've got more. If you don't, I have.
I just had, in terms of both the Community Housing Aotearoa and a Vital Healthcare Property Trust, we're kind of seeking a bit of clarification on some of the rules. And Andrew, I was just wondering, and Letitia, if it might be easier to respond offline to maybe some of the concerns, but certainly Vital Healthcare Property Trust, that's not an issue I've heard come up yet before, if you're able to respond. Or in the essence of time, maybe.
Well, I can say briefly, yeah, we have read the submission, and yeah, it does, you know, that there is merit to it. It's something that I think the planning standards anticipates as well. And so my colleague, Anna, will be in contact with you guys to talk about options for that. I think what you set out is what we were thinking as well, that if we did recommend that it move to a hospital zone, that we'd have site-specific development controls around it, similar to what we've got for the regional hospital, because of course the Bowen site and the Wakefield site are quite different in terms of you know, the topography in the neighbourhood. So you need to design accordingly. So yeah, so we'll be in touch with that.
I think
Thanks, Andrew.
That's great to hear. And it did, as you were all talking, it seemed like a very sensible thing you were asking for, that if you want to be able to continue to using that space and that site the way it's being used, we should try and make that as easy as possible for you. So really appreciate you taking the time to come in today. For Vic and Chris from the Community Housing Aotearoa, I know that the staff have done some work on this assisted housing stuff, and they are looking very much at how we take into consideration the value uplift that is created for the owners where we're upzoning, and how we can turn that into an assisted housing. Do you have any views particularly about then how we should then turn around and use that funding, or how we should administer that funding?
And our general thought is that, you know, this then is a contribution back to the community and should be held long term. for community benefit. And so we look at that retention, and we believe that in advocating for our members around this, they are registered community housing providers that are regulated under Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. So there's an ongoing oversight function there that council would not need to duplicate. They're also community-based and iwi Maori organizations, so they have representation. Most of them are, and in the instance of the Wellington Network, all of them are charities. And so you also have charity services oversight. And so putting those into long-term rental housing, or if it were into progressive home ownership in a way that either the land was held in perpetuity on a long-term lease, like the Queenstown Lakes Community Housing Trust has developed a secure home model. So you can have the benefit of ownership, but just not of the underlying land, with a longer term lease and inheritability. Or just being retained long-term as below market rental housing based on incomes within the community, in that way that it could serve generations of Wellingtonians going into the future.
Thank you. That's really interesting to hear that point of view. I also had a question for Martin. Martin, you were showing us this graphic of what the views will look like from Waitangi Park looking up towards Mount Vic. And I was just wondering, what do you think that we should be thinking about when we're trying to preserve some of that view of the ridgeline and the town belt? Like how much of that view, or what I'm trying to ask, what are the elements of that view that you think are really important for us to preserve for the future?
I think basically what's existing at present. So I think you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot by trying to have an area that you're going to call a character precinct, and then putting a big wall around it with high-rise multi-unit developments that have got less restrictive rules against them. So they can go right to the boundary. They can be twice the height. They don't have any site coverage rules applying. And you're trying to preserve character. I think the two are mutually exclusive. So you can't have one with the other. It doesn't work. And the planners have not taken sufficient notice of the topography that basically that ridge line that hangs at the top of Hawker Street, of Roxburgh Street, if you put that height of development on there, it basically walls off the whole of the view of the town belt. And I think that's a very negative aspect on the environmental look of the building, of the whole space. So I can't see how you can have both together. And when you look at that particular area, the value of the properties, like specifically where I did the render of that big block of buildings, and that is probably the most feasible at present, because it's 4 sites that are combined. They had been held by one owner for a long time, and the corner site a few years, well, probably about 3 years ago, on the corner of Roxburgh and Hood Street was for sale for 1.8 and never sold. But recently, all the way from Hood Street, the next 4 sites up have been sold for 15 mil. So basically that site has doubled in its value based on the prospective development potential of it. And that's what you're likely to get. I mean, no developer's going to pay that sort of money without expecting to get a return on it. It's never going to be assisted housing. It's going to be expensive housing, and it's going to have a very detrimental impact on the view of the town belt.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Jenny. Just one final partai, Alistair. Because the district plan deals a lot with design guides, for the concerns that you have outlined, what kind of good design guides would you look for in a development to kind of meet some of the concerns? Are there good ones or bad ones that you could point us to?
From my perspective, what currently works has, well, the current design standards and design guidelines have been pretty effective in preserving Mount Vic as and the other character areas as they should be. There should be a strengthening of some of the rules, but not erosion of the rules. The moment you start eroding any of the rules, you might give up on the character areas and just plant concrete all around the place and put more windows in and be done with it. And just one other point on top of this is I've recently stopped work and I enjoy Aotearoa Tramping Club and going out into nature. And the other point about green spaces, I really want to endorse, because I think I've become a nicer, pleasanter person by being in nature. There's, you get the endorphins and all that, but when you're in a concrete jungle and all you see is concrete and high-rise buildings, and you're putting, I think you're making us all slaves and prisoners to an ideal that an idea that I don't think will work.
Thank you, Alistair. I too agree that being in nature makes me a happier person, but also maybe sometimes high density developments can be done really well. Like, for example, the Hannah Street ones that our other submitters were talking from today. I think those are pretty awesome. But Councillor Condi.
That is agreed. That is agreed. It can be done well, but I don't trust developers. And when you look at the past, it's prologue to the future. And if you asked about design guides, well, they work around them, work through them. If you ask my opinion, strengthen them. But also picking up Martin's point about crippling the viewscape by putting high-rise buildings, that's not doing it well. And yeah, there's a developer waiting to make a big quid on that Roxburgh site.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, Councillor Condi, but just it's really nice here today that we've been able to agree on some common values around housing people, but doing it really well and being careful with our design guides, and also the appreciation for green space, which is fantastic to hear. That hasn't been in a lot of the hearings, but thank you.
Thanks, Councillor O'Neill. I think that's actually a lovely summary of, we've actually had a really good conversation and some pretty strong agreement on a number of things, as well as some concerns raised, which we definitely acknowledge. I don't have any further questions, so I'm inclined to wrap the session up here, unless there's anybody who has a final burning comment they'd like to share before we go.
Other than to say thank you very much for the opportunity to present. And Zoom has actually works very well for these things, doesn't it?
It can do, thanks, John, as long as you don't suddenly have technical problems, which sometimes happens, but we got through it. So thank you all. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come and speak with us. We know that your time's valuable, and we do appreciate that you've taken time to give us feedback on this plan. And I know that Andrew and all our other staff are working, beavering away to come back to us with lots of suggestions based on your feedback. So we're really looking forward to that. Thank you, and have a lovely rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillors, and to the other submitters, thank you.
Thanks.
All right. All right, I see 4. I'm going to call that a win and move on. Hopefully we've got 2 more people. They might be joining us as we're going through the session, but welcome this evening. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy days and evenings to come and join us today to give us your views about the district plan. My name's Councillor Jenny Condi. I'm from Takapū Northern Ward. I live in Tawa. And you'll also see Councillor Terry O'Neill, who's finishing her dinner. And Terry's with us. She's from Paikawakawa Eastern Ward. Sorry, Te Motukairangi Eastern Ward, Paikawakawa Southern Ward. And so we've got, at the moment, we've got 4 public participants with us, and we might have a couple of more. The format for this evening is that You'll all get about 5 minutes to share your views on the district plan and kind of have your say, and then we'll have some time, once we've heard from everybody, we'll take some time for some questions and a bit of discussion at the end of the session. If you'd like to just quickly introduce yourselves, I can just so that sort of who you are, where you're from, and maybe if there's a particular topic of the district plan you're here to talk about, we'll do a quick introduction and then we will go on to our first speaker. Before I do that, I should also introduce you to the two staff who are in the room. So we've got Adam McCutcheon, who's going to give you a wave. Hi, Adam. Thank you. He's one of our planners who's been working on the district plan. And we've also got Letitia Lowry, who's been helping with all the admin and getting everybody to the right place at the right time this evening. So I'll just hang over for a quick introduction from Amy, and then I'll pass to Bruce.
Sorry, I had to unmute.
Yes.
Kia ora, I'm from Island Bay, Southgate area, and our submission to the plan was just a really simple thing. So we just thought we'd orally share that because we would be good to hear your thoughts. So yeah.
Great, thanks Amy. And Ruth?
Kia ora koutou, katoa, ko Ruth Burdekin toko ingoa, no peretana nui o ko tupuna, kei te noho o ki te whanganui atara. So hi, my name is Ruth Burdekin. I live here in Wellington, and tonight I'm here to present my submission on SNAs.
Great, thank you, Ruth. Now, Glenn, are you with us at the moment? Are you able to introduce yourself?
Sorry, I'm currently just on the phone with Glenn. We're having some issues with connecting to the audio, so we're trying to sort that at present.
Okay, thanks, Letitia. And I also saw that Craig dropped out. He was also having some issues. Sorry, let me check the chat. Yeah, Craig has also dropped out and going to join us on another machine. All right, I'm going to suggest that we just press on because I don't want you to both run out of time or whatever. So I'll start with you, Ruth, and just hand it over to you for your 5 minutes.
Kia ora, and thank you very much for your time. So I'm here tonight, as I said, in response to the SNAs. And I'm representing my partner and I, who have a rather large one on our backyard. So what we'd like to say is that we support SNAs within currently held and public land. We object to SNAs in their current format on private property. And we just feel it's kind of like the council trying to score greenie points by making a public good out of private property. We believe the current SNA format is effectively recommending a land confiscation, and we would like you to note that New Zealand has very strong property laws, and any land confiscation is likely to end up in lengthy and costly court cases, which we also object to as ratepayers. We have some concerns over the lack of management plans and projected costs of implementing these SNAs. So we've reviewed your reports, and what we've found is we don't think that there's been a fully developed and thought through plan on managing SNAs, especially on private properties. Other councils have considered compensation. However, despite spiraling costs of living and some pretty hefty rate hikes, we know that the Wellington City Council outright rejected a proposal along those lines. The current plans do not encourage biodiversity, and they don't consider biosecurity. There is no consideration on the impact of climate change on SNAs, and we're concerned at the static nature of them. We don't see plans regarding sustainability, and in this I'm referring to encouraging the development of native vegetation, investigations into what might our qualifications be for ETS credits and carbon sinks, which could provide an income for the council to be spread across SNA owners. And we don't see an ability for SNA owners to develop sympathetic green energy infrastructure. So I'm talking things like micro hydro generation, wind, solar, rainwater capture, all of which support Wellington's goal of becoming a green eco-city, unless of course we're going to add some large bureaucracy costs in there. We have not seen a management plan on how to address the maintenance of SNAs. So here we see a lack of clarity around the terms of trimming and maintaining existing tracks and buildings. We see limitations on landowners being able to provide access way and enter and enjoy the SNA and managing pests and weeds. We haven't seen a consideration, there's no consideration for the disparity for pest and weed control between public and privately owned SNAs or between adjoining privately owned SNAs. It shows us a lack of system thinking. We're also concerned that there have been no estimated costs on what the council would need to support maintenance and compliance of rules of SNAs. And we've got no idea how this would impact private landowners' access. So will the council just turn up on our land to, in regards to compliance? Will they take aerial pictures which may impede our privacy? We think the desktop review of SNAs is inadequate. As an example, we have large tracts of gorse and barberry, i.e. weeds, that are currently considered part of the SNA. In closing, it appears the Wellington City Council had good intentions for continuing with the SNA process, and while many other councils suspended theirs, it would now seem that councils across the country have recognised that the SNA is more than simply labelling swathes of land from an aerial image and walking away, especially when it comes to private land. As ratepayers already struggling with rapidly increasing rates and failing infrastructure, we encourage the council to reconsider their proposal and suspend incorporation of private land into SNAs until the issues we have raised can be properly addressed. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Bruce. Really appreciate that. And I will have questions for you, but I'll wait until we've heard from everybody else. We'll go to you now, Amy. I'll hand over to you for 5 minutes.
Cool, thank you. Can you just tell me what an SNA stands for?
Sure, it's a significant natural area, and the idea is it's supposed to include important native biodiversity, but it's been quite controversial because it has gone onto a number of people's backyards, and it places restrictions on the use of that land.
Right, okay. So good to clarify that. I guess ours is similar but different. So our house backs onto a beautiful piece of land that looks over Taputeranga. So, and it's a Māori heritage site, which is awesome, and I'm all for that. And I think that that is just the most amazing thing. And it's beautiful, and in its peaceful kind of solidarity, it's just amazing. So that's really, really cool. We only recently purchased this house, and when we purchased it, I rang the heritage guys at the council, and they said to me, hey, there's a draft district plan happening at the moment, and it's because I said to them, it's a bit weird because our property and the property beside us are actually included in that boundary, and it's like a dotted line that specifically goes around our boundaries. And he said, yeah, that's not right. He said, that's pretty unusual. And he said, I think that that's an error, and I don't think that that should be a part of your property. And so I mean, really, we're just asking you to reconsider that. He sort of said to me that he thought that that was a bit of a line on the map because it's so specific to the boundary rather than it being specific to an area, and he just asked that I put that forward if that could be taken off. So it's actually our property and our neighbours as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Amy. That's an unusual thing that you've got going on there, but very important to your little neck of the woods.
Totally, yeah.
So I know that Adam, who's our staff member, is on the call, and so he'll be able to follow up on your specific case directly as well.
Awesome. That might have been who I spoke to, maybe. Yeah, I don't know, but anyway, it was really helpful, and he just this was the best forum to put it forward because it was a bit odd that it had been popped onto that, and it was just so specific to these two, and it was only subdivided I think in 1980, so it's not that old, so it was potentially just got looped in with the kind of the boundaries. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Amy. I think Adam or someone in Adam's team will follow that one up because it is something that we need to double check and
yeah, great.
Hopefully you'll be hearing from somebody
Thank you.
about that. Thank you. I'm just going to check in. Have we got Glenn and Grace? Are you able to hear us, and are we able to hear you?
Yeah, my name's actually Craig. So
Hi,
my
Craig.
main machine's not working properly, so I've had to use my daughter's
It's all good.
What do you do? Just put start video for camera, is it?
Yep. If you turn start video on, your camera should come on. Yep, there we are.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Wicked. So 5 minutes for you, Craig. I'll just hand it over to you, and then once we've finished with you, I'll have 5 minutes from Glenn, and then once we've heard from everybody, then we'll have some question time.
Okay, thank you. Just apologies first. I am COVID positive at the moment, so I've got a lot of cough and bad throat and all that. So I might have to use a tissue in between, but I apologise in advance. The issue, basically with the district plan, myself and I represent a number of people down our street, which is Moya Street in Mount Victoria. We don't have a great deal of opposition necessarily to the plan. However, we're in a bit of a unique situation whereby we back onto Aotearoa, which is the city centre zone. So what that means is under the district plan as it would be now, we could have, we've got a heritage status on our street, and that's all well and good. We can go up to 11 metres if someone develops down our street, but right at the back of our property borders, because it's central city zone, something there could go up 28.5 metres. So we could have some quite towering high 8-storey buildings right behind us. So that's the principal issue we've got. And apart from sunlight and whatever, yes, there's issues with all that. What we're suggesting is that we look at having some kind of staggered development for these cases where residential backs directly onto the central city zone. And I think there's something there, the current regulations now specify something like that as well. So I won't go into it because I've found various policies and what have you, but I think in my submission, and there's a few others on the street, we all collaboratively looked at it, that we could have something like, I think it's 5 metres back and then 8 metres high, and then it sort of can go bigger as it goes back towards Kent Terrace behind us. So that's the principal thing for us, and we're in a bit of a unique situation. We didn't think there's many other places around the city where there's a hard boundary like that. I think we're fairly unique, and it's only a small strip. Moving on to that, just some other matters. We sort of lack green space a bit in this the lower end of Mount Victoria. So I know there's a bit of development proposed, but it would be nice if we could have some park space and maybe even a kids park or something like that. Rather than complete developments, just having something reserved for park space. So moving on, geological concerns. Now, at the lower end of Mount Victoria here, the land, we're getting pretty flat, and I've noticed when I dig down or something rather, it doesn't take me long to get to the water table. There's been a fault line recently discovered that's going down Kent Terrace, the Aotearoa fault, whatever. And it is a lot of reclaimed land there. Sort of I'm just querying, is it really the right place to be building buildings of a fairly high level? And just moving on, sort of probably infrastructure, but we're probably at a very low point in Mount Victoria. We do have a lot of, I know that people down the other end, lower end of the street do have sewage backfill, especially when there's a lot of rain. We've had a lot of sewage issues. I notice, we have water restrictions at the moment, so I'm just questioning how's the council position for the infrastructure for a lot more infill of people, because we seem to have issues coping with a lot of that now. So that's that. And the other thing, I guess, another query, and it's probably not council, it's more government and central government, I guess, is just the schooling. So we've sort of got 2 schools in this area, Clyde Key School, and people are probably fairly familiar, is a fairly small footprint school. It's at capacity now. I think Mount Cook just over on Tory Street is another. It's got a little bit of ground, but especially in the primary school realm, there's not really much. Where are these extra stuff? All these extra people, there's a lot more kids. Where are they going to go? Because there's not a lot of space for schools or traditional schools in the sense we've been used to them. So I think that's mine really. Yeah, so as I mentioned, the principal one really is the hard interface into a city zone or a residential zone, and looking to get something staggered there. So that's principally it.
Thanks, Craig. I'm just going to ask Adam. Adam, I know that the intention was that there would be some sort of transition zones on the edges where things meet. Could you very quickly, is there anything we can tell Craig about how that transition might work near his home?
Yeah, so with respect to the street, it does adjoin the city centre zone with a 28.5 metre height limit. Standard S3 applies, which limits development on that boundary with a 12 metre and 60 degree recession plane. So we're only talking a metre higher than what would be permitted under the medium density residential standards anyway. So there is that's a pretty significant restriction for a city centre zone along that boundary. That applies to all of the character precincts, so further north as well, where those character precincts adjoin the city centre zone. That's the rule.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, CCZS3 is the one to look at there.
Do you want to repeat that again, Adam?
CCZS3.
Thank you. I knew I was confident you would be able to come in with the specific information. So yeah, I know that staff had considered those transitionary zones, Craig, but I also know how difficult it can be in this enormous document to find the specific thing that tells you that.
It was a collaborative effort for a number of us looking through and trying to find various bits and pieces. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm sure we'll come back with questions on all those other matters, but I just wanted to let Adam kind of give you some facts to address that particular query before we move on.
No, that's good. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yes.
Hey, Glenn, nice to have you with us this evening. If you're able to take yourself off mute, I'm ready to hand over to you for your 5 minutes.
Unmute. Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Councillor Jenny, and good evening to the councillors and others. Oh, now you've frozen. That's interesting. Can you hear me? No.
I can hear you, Glenn.
Oh,
You're
right.
not able to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, just you stopped. I see. So I'm Glenn Kingston. I'm a local resident since 1970 out here in Strathmore Park, and I've been Secretary Treasurer of the Strathmore Park Residents Association since a bit after then. And I served for 6 years as an Eastern Side residents representative on the Noise Management Committee, and that was from 2001. We made 4 points in our submission, and the first point I'll spend most time on, if that's okay. There's a bit of background to that. Following outcome of appeals, the operative 2001 airport and golf course precinct plan incorporated a collection of WCC bylaws, confirmed the curfew hours and rules, and introduced the 65 dB noise limit boundary, which encompassed 700 residences around the airport property. An Illinois Management Committee was also formed, comprising airport management, airline operators, defence, council regulatory, and 4 elected community representatives. They had a number of issues set down as work streams for the Management Committee, and the one I'm sort of speaking to tonight is the nature of noise treatment for existing residences within the noise boundary. By 2012, which is a long time after, the treatment to be offered in the noise bands within that area was agreed, and property owners were notified of the measures which they would be entitled to and the procedures for acceptance. Despite there being several properties in Strathmore Park, we understand that not one has yet been treated. So these are within the existing air noise boundary. In 2012, a press release stated that the program would be completed in 10 years, which is about now, but it hasn't. Now, we propose a further air noise band outside the existing boundary, and this association draws on the current approach by several councils to provide noise treatment in these zones down to 60 decibels, at least in the form of a ventilation package, to ensure that safe indoor noise exposure is achieved. We further propose that eligibility for treatment of properties within this band be triggered after the noise levels have been exceeded for a specified period from the 90-day rolling average measurement. In this way, the airport will have the opportunity over time to reduce noise exposure by other means, such as restricting the use of older aircraft, encouraging electric-powered aircraft, etc. Wellington Airport already has microphones on the existing boundary, and we believe it would be a simple matter to determine where a 60 dB boundary would be on a regular basis. At this time, the 60 dB envelope is unlikely to be beyond the existing air noise boundary because of COVID. Pre-COVID noise levels at the boundary were consistently around 3 dB lower than the 65 dB. However, WIL expects to fill the noise bucket with the introduction of more services, wide-bodied jets, etc. The addition of a 60 dB boundary will provide further reassurance to residents that there will be a consequence in the case that noise levels in this area are exceeded. There is a further point we mentioned about in Auckland, they introduced a 58.5 band in an area where their northern runway was approved. And that actually involved an encroachment of an additional airport noise towards a residential area not previously affected. We submit that a similar circumstance occurs in our Strathmore Park area when the east side area is developed as planned, and therefore we propose a 58.5 envelope should be established directly behind and fanning out from the residences listed for treatment in the east side plan conditions. Why now? Well, I say now because, as per the background, the noise treatment is set down in the 2001 plan has taken 21 years to not complete affected residences. With this timing delay, we submit it's not too early to introduce rules for a more healthy outcome and improved well-being for our suburban residents. We do have a reference study. I can pass that on, but it was we used it for their submission to the east side requirement, notice of requirement, and it's aircraft noise effects on health by Dr. Charlotte Clark, Queen Mary University of London, 2015. That's a publicly available document. Two other short points. Our second issue was timing of treatment for the houses that are already listed for ventilation treatment in the east side. And we submit the noise treatment should be offered prior to, it's currently being offered in time for operation of wide-bodied jets in the eastern side. And we submit it should be altered to prior to the commencement of the construction phase of earth removal, 5 million cubic meters, major wall construction, 30 meters high in some locations, base preparation and laying of massive area of tarmac for taxiways and stands. Now, this is the largest work that will be conducted in our suburb since 1959, when a certain Trans-Tasman airport was opened, which has now become an international airport, of course. Enough of that. Our point 3 was an error. We believe there's a cut and paste error, and I think your council officers should be able to deal with that. And the last one was car parking. We're not satisfied that the east side designation, it allows for car parking as a permitted activity, and we're not satisfied with that. The justification for the airport's requirement was entirely based on the need for additional land for airside use. And car parking is not part of an airside activity, it's a landside. And we don't wish to see our golf course buffer zone converted to car parking during the long stand down period of 15 years. My last point, in the 2040 master plan, refer to that, there's no open area ground level car parking shown at all, apart from a small area near to the freight handling facilities, which we assume will be staff parking for freight handling companies. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Really appreciate that. And it's always really useful to hear from someone like you who has so many years of experience and expertise on a really specific issue like this. So thanks for taking the time to come and talk to us. I'm going to assume that Councillor O'Neill will probably have questions for you shortly. So I'm going to start with a question for Ruth, if you don't mind. Thanks for coming in, Ruth. Really appreciate it. I guess one of the things I was interested in was you mentioned that the SNAs don't consider biosecurity, and I was really interested in that. We've had lots of submissions on SNAs and nobody's mentioned biosecurity yet, so I really wanted to know what it was you had in mind there.
Sure. Okay. So there's no such thing as biodiversity unless you have biosecurity. So if we want to increase the biodiversity of our area, which is, you know, a great idea, I don't disagree with it, we need to make sure that our biosecurity is strong. So an example that I can give you, for instance, is myrtle rust, which we know unfortunately has made its way to Wellington. Now, that's an airborne, is it bacteria, fungus? Airborne fungus that has come through. And as I mentioned in my submission, we've got changes to our climate, unfortunately, which are going to happen. And the impact of that climate change, unfortunately, means that we're going to have a higher number of pests and diseases that we've never had in our country before, which we may have to manage. So my point around biosecurity is that you need it to protect biodiversity, which is a key outcome of the SNAs. And if we look at, I'm just trying to think of another example, Koru dieback is a perfect example, actually. You have an area that has been infected by a really serious deadly disease to one of our national taonga, and it is moved, it's easily transported from one area to another. If we're setting up SNAs and they're not managed in the same way, that refers back to my comment about system thinking, you could potentially have a pretty major problem with biosecurity impacting biodiversity if it's not controlled across the system. Is that?
Yeah, thank you. Really helpful. I was also just wondering, have you had council staff or an ecologist come and look at the SNA on your property?
Yeah.
And if you have, what's the kind of rarest or most special thing that's on there?
We haven't got a report yet.
Okay.
Yeah, so their first comment was, wow, there is a lot of gorse here. So yeah, and we're aware of that, and you know, that's part of regenerating land as well. So I guess our submission is slightly different in that we don't want to build here, which I understand a lot of the submissions have been about. We live in a green space, we love it, but we're just really concerned about how it's going to be managed, what the cost of that is, and that, you know, we're going to lose the enjoyment or the potential enjoyment as we start to regenerate this area.
Awesome, thanks for that, Ruth. Tara, do you have any questions that you would like to ask now?
Not specifically on SNAs, but I just wonder, so for the submitter Amy Miller, because your issue is quite specific and I don't want you to kind of have to trail through, I wonder if we could start maybe now, Adam, if you're willing to respond to that request, just if there were any specifics or reassurances, or what should Amy do next? What can we do to assist that?
Sure. So all of the sites of significance to Malafenoa that have been identified in the plan have been identified and located through workshops with kaumātua about particularly using oral histories and other sources that they've got about where these places are and where their extents are. I don't know about the specifics of this site, so what I've already done is I've flicked a screenshot of, I'm pretty confident I know which site we're talking about here, because I know that I can see the two residential zone properties that are within it, to understand what the background is and how that map has taken place, because I know that all around it it's open space zone. So I don't know about the particulars of the place, but I'm following up with the people who have mapped it to see what the input was that went into it. So I can connect you up when they've seen it and when we've got a sense of understanding. But yeah, all I can talk to is that the sites have been identified with through a collaborative workshop sense with Ngāti Toa Rangatira and Port Nick.
Yeah, because I mean, my understanding is that that identification has been there historically, so it's not a new thing with this new draft district plan. It just has happened to carry over.
Yes, we went through and reconfirmed all of the existing sites as well. So it hasn't just been new ones, but all of the ones that have currently been on the operative district plan had been run past iwi for their confirmation. So that's all I can say about this specific one. But I'll connect you up with the people who have done that, and we can have a chat.
Yeah, that would be really good. So are they going to contact us by email, or what's the usual process and what's the time frame?
I couldn't find the name of your submission to find your contact details, but perhaps I'll just directly message you through here, and then we can get some details exchanged.
Yep. Okay, we'll do that.
Cool.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, cool. Glad we were able to start taking that one off. Yes, Councillor Condi, as you predicted, I had a few partai for Glenn. Good to see you again, Glenn. And I think I should mention our fellow ward representative, Councillor Sean Rush, was supposed to be here today, but he's quite ill with COVID at the moment. So just to acknowledge he would have been here, and I'll pass on notes of your submission to the other two. Okay. Yeah. I wanted to ask, in your experience, the timing of the treatment of houses within the airport boundary. You spoke about a 2001 promise from the airport, or was that the district plan? Or could you just elaborate a little bit more on
in
that?
2001, there was a work plan was specified for the air noise committee, which was set up by that district plan or town plan or whatever it was called. And the work plan went on from 2001, 2012, where they looked at all the houses within the air noise boundary, divided them up into noise bands of just, maybe less than 5 dB or so. And the airport actually purchased 44 houses in Bridge Street because they couldn't treat them at all. And in 2012, there's a press release where it was all finished, the decisions were all made. And there is where they said it was a 10-year plan to then go ahead and treat. The ones inside, the ones nearest the airport, would have been insulated and ventilated. The ones in Strathmore Park, which is near the outer boundary, would have been qualified for ventilation only, and there was a percentage, 75%, 25 airport versus council. Also recall they are collecting 40 cents from every airport passenger, and they've been doing that since whenever. I'm not sure if it was 2001 or 2012. And nobody's ever known how much money is in the pile for that. We don't get much information, but presumably that's paying for the insulation.
Okay. Then a partai for Adam. Would you be able, I know this is quite in the detail here, so if it wasn't your particular role, totally understandable. But would you be able to just respond to Wellington City Council's evaluation of the air noise boundaries surrounding Wellington Airport? And I guess I have seen some proposed changes and engagement from Wellington Airport on the draft district plan, but I'm wanting to know, what new understanding have we got? Have there been any recent reports and responses there?
So a couple of things. So the designations have been appealed. That would be the first thing to note. As I understand it, there's no date that's been set down for that to be heard in the Environment Court. Secondly, there will likely have to be changes to the air noise boundary as a result of those designations if they're confirmed, because the operating area is increasing. I couldn't say what the effect of that would be, but the district plan will need to reflect that and have appropriate noise mitigation measures, particularly for new development that is to occur within that new air noise boundary. I don't know a lot of detail about Wellington Airport's mitigation plans and how they undertake that, so I'm unable to answer that question, sorry.
There are people who are opposing the change to the air noise boundary, but pragmatically, wide-body jets' wheels will actually be running over the existing air noise boundary when and if the east side is occupied by the airport. So it's just not tenable that that boundary remains the same. That's not something we're specifically opposing. We're looking to more increase the boundary to provide a lower noise band for residents beyond the existing boundary. But I think the boundary, if the east side goes ahead, the boundary will have to be shifted. There's no other viable alternative.
Yeah, no, cool. Thank you, Anna, for your response, and thank you for clarifying, Glenn. I know it's a rock and a hard place for us, but hopefully we can get some stuff sorted. Thanks, Chair.
Kia ora, thanks, Terry. Craig, I just wanted to come back to you, and I was interested in your query about the lack of public green space, and I guess where, as a local resident, where would you like to see more green space near you, and what kind of green space? Are you thinking like pocket parks, or you mentioned playgrounds, or there's lots of different kinds of green space. It could just be trees, it could be lawn.
Something like the Piri Street Park by the bus tunnel, where there's a little bit of grass in a kids' play area, and I've got kids and grandkids and what, so that sort of thing as well would be quite good. I mean, it's we got the town, but everything's all up that higher end, and there's not a lot down this end. We got the basin, of course, but that's not a general. You can't really use that to any extent. So something like that, it doesn't have to be that big necessarily, would be quite nice.
Yeah. How far is it, just walking distance, how far is it to walk to? What is your nearest green space? Do you know?
Well, there's Pukeahu Park, which isn't really for kids and whatever. I don't see that as a great sort of park. That's not too far, and I have to cross a number of, 2 roads, I think. It's normally up to Piri Street, which isn't too far. I mean, I'm probably at the greatest sort of distance away as a low resident in Mount Vic. I mean, it's 10 minutes walk, I guess. It's not too bad, but it's more in, I guess, if we're getting a lot more people and places being built up, it'd be nice to have some reserved piece of green space for everyone to use. Yeah,
absolutely. And I just wanted to come back to your query about the new fault line, because I assure you I read that media story and immediately emailed some stuff about that too. So I've asked that question about whether our natural hazards chapter needs to be updated or what information we have about that. And I will be keeping an eye out for it, because I agree with you that I wanted to know a bit more about that as well.
Yeah, I was quite surprised and thinking that's only a stone's throw from here, really. So, quite sizable fault line.
Yeah, so I haven't got a lot of information yet. The very initial impressions was just that while it is a fault line, it's probably a smaller one. Like, we've got lots of smaller ones around Wellington, and not on the same scale as the fault line that runs through Thorndon. But I'm still waiting back for a kind of more detailed and official report, which we'll keep an eye out for.
Yeah, cool.
Terry, did you have any further questions? No, neither do I. No. I just wanted to thank everybody for taking your time out of your evening to come and talk to us. And it's actually been a great session to illustrate just the wide variety of issues that we're dealing with in a district plan like this. So thanks as well for kind of listening to everybody else's submissions. It's really great. And we will, staff will be writing up reports based on all of your feedback that will come back to councillors for us to make a decision in June, Adam?
Yes, so June the 23rd is the date that's been set down for committee.
Okay. Yeah.
So, so that's when it will come back to councillors for us to be making kind of final decisions on all of these things, just so that you kind of know what the timeline is. Really appreciate all of your time, and we do have a bit of time if anybody would like to have the burning last minute statement. I'm happy to take any final comments.
Will that June date be the production of a draft district plan, or just responses to all the participants?
So I can just outline the process. So we intend to notify the proposed district plan in mid-July. That date is to meet the government's requirements through the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, and also changes to the RMA in December last year. So working backwards from mid-July, the 23rd of June date is when officers will be providing a final version of the district and seeking council approval to notify. There may be some things that we have to do in that time period between June and July, but 23rd of June is the key date that we have.
Well, just my point is, would there be any kind of response to submitters, particularly from associations or something?
Yep, so all of the officer responses to submissions will be detailed in our Section 32 evaluation reports. So that will contain a section of all the consultation that we've done up until this point of notification of all the various topics, and it will detail what submissions we received, a summary of them, and then an officer response about how any changes to the district were made as a result of that submission.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because so far the reports have just factually stated that they've been received and the content
Correct.
sometime. Okay.
Yep. So that's a good point. So the global research report that's available online at the moment is a higher level summary. Officers are going through every submission and every submission point in detail to look at those, the micro changes that might be needed to the plan.
It seemed to me too that summary, even the detail, if an item was already in the district plan, it doesn't seem to have been mentioned at all by the consultants.
I guess it depended if there was a submission point on that matter, and how they grouped them within various themes. So they didn't speak about every single submission that was received. It was more sort of high level, like several submitters commented on the issue of noise within proximity to the airport. It didn't you call out every single submission that we received, but we'll group them and theme them together to get the general picture.
Okay. I was happy with the comments about ours anyway. Yeah, thank you. Good.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thanks, Glenn. So yes, so the process is obviously we're hearing lots of submissions from lovely people like you who are sharing your views, and then the staff will write detailed reports to come back for us to go through for some bedtime reading for us to get through all of those details before we make a decision about on the 23rd of June about what the actual final details we want in the district plan that we will be notifying in July. And then once it's notified in July, if you're not familiar with this process, there are still processes of providing submissions. They just don't come to council anymore or councillors. They would go to an independent body of commissioners. So even us making our final decisions isn't the end of the process. And once you get to July, if you still have concerns, you can make submissions through that formal notification process as well.
So with the independent people, that would ensure that, like our submission, council is a part owner of the airport. So we'll go to independent to kind of remove that that relationship.
Yes. Yeah.
Although I know council operates as a regulatory part, there's a commercial part, so councils, it's pretty difficult to say that any one person in council is an owner of the airport.
Yes. All right. Hey, thank you so much for your time this evening, everyone. I hope that you have a lovely rest of your evening. And thanks again. We really are grateful that you took the time to make a submission and come and talk to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Lisa.
Bye.
Good night. Thank you.